Hi everyone, here's chapter 5, the integumentary system. So this is our first actual body system for the semester. And this is hair, skin, and nails. And it's a really important system. It's the largest system by mass and really important to keep intact and keep healthy. Okay, so this is what the integumentary system consists of. So skin, hair, nails, and then you have sweat glands and sebaceous glands. And we've talked about glands before in the tissue chapter. So the skin has two distinct parts and then the underneath. So the epidermis is the outer part. It's about as thick as a page of paper, depending on what part of the body. And it's avascular. That means it doesn't have blood flow. So if you get a paper cut, you're only cutting through your epidermis. That's kind of how you tell. And then your dermis is underneath. It's about as thick as 30 pages of paper. And there's different layers. And it is vascular, so that's if you bleed, that's the layer that you have cut into, and that's also where they put ink for tattoos. And then the hypodermis is beneath that, and it's got fat. It's not technically part of the skin, like it's not technically part of the integumentary. So it's got adipose tissue for protection and insulation, and anchors to the muscles. So there's the skin. Up here you have the epidermis, and then down below you have the dermis. You can see it's avascular, and sweat glands and oil glands open up into the epidermis, and then the hair also. And oh, do you see the little wiggly lines here? We'll talk about this later, but that's how fingerprints form. That's what fingerprints are. The little interface between the dermis and epidermis. Then you have other structures like nerve structures of different types, so you can feel deep touch and light touch. Let me get my laser on. And then here's your blood vessels. Every hair has its own blood supply, and that's what gives it nutrients to form. And every hair has its own little muscle, and that's what makes your muscles stand up when you have goosebumps. Okay, so epidermis is the top part. It's made of keratinocytes, which are a type of cell that are made that make keratin, and they slough off throughout the day. So you actually slough off a lot of your epidermis throughout the day. So that's one type of cell that's in your epidermis. And then you have melanocytes. Those start towards the bottom and in the deepest part of the epidermis, and they make pigment. So that's what melanin is. And there's two different types of pigment. You can have eumelanin or pheomelanin. And when you are damaged by the sun, then you're going to make more melanin. And then you have dendritic cells. They help with the immune system. So they are little macrophages, and they are the little police. And then you have tactile Merkel cells, and they do light touch. So they can just sense, like if you have like a hair on you or something, or a little spider creeping on you, you can feel that. Okay, the epidermis has 5 layers, which is crazy because it's like pretty thin, but it has 5 layers of cells in there. And some parts of your body only have 4 layers. So like your skin that can get like calloused, that has 5 layers, and that's because it has this stratum lucidum. But then the other parts of your skin only have 4 layers. So stratum basale, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum. And that goes from bottom to top. Okay, so stratum basale is I know that's a weird word, but that's how you say it. That's the bottom layer, the deepest layer closest to the dermis, firmly attached to the dermis. So you can think of it like the base layer. And it's got melanocytes. The cells eventually start from the stratum basale and they make their way up to the top layer, and that's where they slough off. So it takes about a month. And then stratum spinosum, think of like spiny. So it's the prickly layer. So these are several cells thick. They kind of form a web. They are known as the prickle cells, resist tension and pulling. And then stratum granulosum, these are like 4 to 6 cells thick. These are all like flat cells. And this is where keratinization starts. And so they'll start to make keratin at that layer. and then they'll be moving up. So they just like start from the stratum basale and move up through these layers. And then stratum lucidum is only in like callousy, kind of like palms and feet and things. It's a clear layer. That's why it's called lucidum, like translucent, right? 2 or 3 cells thick. And then you have the stratum granulosum. And then the stratum corneum is known as the horny layer. So these can form like a thicker layer, like a harder layer, right? So counts for 3/4 of epidermal thickness. Oh my goodness. And it's 20 to 30 rows of flat cells, so a thicker layer. And this is where all the cells eventually move up to, and these are mostly dead, but they protect your skin, they prevent water loss, act as that barrier to keep your inside safe. Cells are always going through apoptosis. Well, not all cells, but these cells are. And this is known as program or controlled cell death. So it's like a programmed like self-destruct sequence that cells have, and they actually kind of poison themselves. And it's good and healthy, and it prevents cancer. Cells are supposed to do apoptosis. So you can think of like dandruff or dander. You can shed 50,000 cells per minute. 50,000 cells isn't very many, but you can shed a lot of cells every minute, and we're doing it all the time. That's most of the dust in our houses and buildings is made from cells. Okay, so here's the layers. Let's see here. So you've got stratum basale, right here's the dermis. So stratum basale, it has melanocytes. Right there's a melanocyte, and you can see it's kind of like, oh my gosh, finger projections sticking up, right? And then stratum spinosum is the spiny layer, kind of looks spiny. There's a dendritic cell. Stratum granulosum is flattened, and keratin is making its way up and being made, and then stratum corneum is up here. And then some have the stratum lucidum right in between, right? And so most of the layers are the stratum corneum. And all this is about as thick as a sheet of paper or a few sheets of paper. So it's really very, like, think of a paper cut. It's that thin. Okay, so then the dermis. Dermis has a lot of unique cells too. Remember that it's vascularized. So it contains nerves, lymphatic vessels. You've got, holy cow, you've got your hair follicles starting in the dermis, and then they poke out in the epidermis, your oil glands, your sweat glands, and also these protective cells that are involved in your immune function. And there's 2 layers there. There's papillary and reticular. So let's see, here's epidermis up here with your 5 layers. Through here, this is where your fingerprints are. These are the dermal papilla. And then you've got your papillary dermis and your reticular dermis. So papillary is areolar tissue, if you remember that. It's like kind of more like fluffy and spread out. And then reticular is denser. Okay, so the dermal papillae are the finger-like projections, and those make your fingerprints. And they also have nerve endings, touch receptors, things like that. They're called Meissner's corpuscles or tactile corpuscles. And then also, like, you have these little dermal ridges, and that is probably, they think, for gripping, for being able to, so your hands aren't super slippery. And then you have little sweat pores that can leave your fingerprint because you're sweating, right? So you leave oil on surfaces, and it's in the imprint of your fingerprint. So here you are, friction ridges. You have little sweat glands. Look at how cute. This is using a scanning electron microscope, which you might have if you're at a university. And so here's the little sweat ducts, and then they leave your fingerprints. Oops, I skipped one. I don't know what that was. Let's see. What are we doing here? Cleavage lines represent separations between underlying collagen fiber and the reticular. So we have these different dermal modifications that can cause like the structure of our skin to look different and have different markings. If you use these when you're doing surgery, then it'll heal better. So, okay, I don't know what the other slide was, so make sure you go back and look at that. Okay, so reticular layer has flexure lines. like near joints, like so that your arms can bend. You know, like imagine like a tight fabric if you're wearing like a tight shirt and it's not stretchy and so you can't bend. Our skin needs those little like lines in order to flex and bend. And so that's why we have all these little creases and things to allow us to move. So here they are, and they allow us to be flexible. Otherwise our skin would be too tight and we wouldn't be able to move. Okay. You can also get stretch marks. You've heard of those, I'm sure. And then you can also, your skin can cause blisters, which are little, there's a lot of weird things that can happen with your skin, right? If you watch that Dr. Pimple Popper, that's a really interesting show. So there's a lot of weird things that can happen. But when your dermis and epidermis separate and fill with fluid, that's a blister. So there's stretch marks called striae. Striae means stripes. Some people are more prone to them than others. Okay, so now skin color. Skin color is produced primarily by melanin. You make melanin in your melanocytes, which are those special cells that make melanin. We make them in response to sun because when we make melanin, it protects us from the sun. It's like a natural sunscreen. But when you make melanin, that means that DNA damage did occur. So that like your DNA is being signaled to produce melanin. So that means you already damaged your DNA. There's two kinds of melanin. There's pheomelanin and eumelanin. Eumelanin is the brownish black. So if you have like brownish skin or black skin, you have eumelanin. And then if you have like a reddish yellow, you have pheomelanin. And you can have both. You can have a combination of both. Okay. If you are exposed to the sun a lot and you get damaged, your skin can become leathery, your immune system can become depressed, it can lead to cancer, destroys folic acid, and you need folic acid if you're pregnant. And then if you are taking certain drugs or like creams, like there's a lot of topical creams that you like for acne or things like that, they cause photosensitivity, so be careful of that too. Okay, carotene also affects skin color. So you do have carotene in you, and it's in like we use it to make vitamin A, so it's in vegetables and things. If you have too much, you can get a yellowish tint. That happens to babies sometimes when they start baby food. And then hemoglobin gives us like that pink color because it's blood. It's the protein in blood. That's what hemoglobin is. Since Caucasians have more transparent skin, the hemoglobin shows up more. So that's one of the reasons they have kind of a pinkish color. And less melanin makes them less dark. Okay, these are some times when your skin color is weird, but it's because of a disease or disorder. So one of them is cyanosis. That's if you don't have enough oxygen in your hemoglobin, so your skin's going to look blue. Now, note that is not because your blood is blue. It's when your blood is deoxygenated, it's a dark red, like a maroon, but it's going to look blue through your skin. You can also have pallor, so you're pale. That can be from anemia, low blood pressure, fear, or anger. Erythema is where you're extra red, and that could be fever, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, inflammation, or allergy. And then jaundice, you might have heard of, is from liver disorders, and that's when you can't break down the bilirubin, which is the byproduct of your blood breaking down. And that happens in babies, but also in adults. You can also have bruises, which is bleeding under the skin. And you can have brown or black necklace. That's where parts of your skin might look a little bit dark for different reasons, like insulin resistance, elevated blood glucose levels. So you might have seen that in people too. Okay, now for hair. Hair is dead keratinized cells, so it's like cells and protein. There's places where we don't have hair, but pretty much most of our bodies have hair, right? The functions are they help us know if there's an insect or something on our skin because our little hairs move and you can feel that. Hair on our head is kind of a helmet. Also protects from sun. That's why I like having hair on my head. Protects from heat loss too. We lose a lot of heat from our brains. Our brains are really cooking up there and using a lot of energy. And then shields skin from sunlight. Okay, so hair is also called pillae, just like on bacteria. and it's produced in hair follicles, which you saw in the epidermis. You have keratin in it. It's waterproof, tough, durable. It's not the same as the keratin in your skin, but it's similar. And then there's the shaft and the root. So when you pull out a hair, like when you're plucking your eyebrows or something, you'll see the root that's under the skin. And keratin is being made there. And then the shaft is where it sticks out, and that's not growing anymore, right? It's just growing in the root. And then there's 3 parts to the hair shaft, and this is relevant if you get your hair colored. This is what they're messing with. So you have the medulla, which is the very center. You have the cortex, which is some layers outside, like on kind of in the middle, and then the cuticle is the very outside. And the layers are overlapping, and so you can think of it like shingles on a roof. And pigment is because you have different amounts of melanation. So red hair has that pheomelanin. Gray or white hair is when you're not making as much melanin. So you've got bubbles instead. And then, of course, brown and black hair, you have more melanin. So this is what it looks like inside. You have the medulla in the middle, and then the cortex, and then what am I pointing to here? So medulla in the middle, and then you have the cortex, and then you have the cuticle. And then this is showing like the cells. This is the follicle that are making the hair. So this is like, I wish I had a different like sideways picture, but this is like deep inside your epidermis or your dermis, where the hair is being made, right? And the hair is right here in the center. Okay. And so the hair bulb is the bottom. Like if you've ever pulled out a hair, it looks like a little bulb there, like a little onion bulb at the bottom. And then you have a hair follicle receptor. So those are the nerve endings that make it hurt when you pull out a hair. And then you've got the follicle that we just saw. So it's got like different layers of cells. Some are from the dermis, some are from the epidermis. And they're making the hair, and they're making the melanin and all of that. Their hair matrix are the new cells that are being made. And then the erectropili was that little muscle that was connected to every hair follicle, and it causes your hairs to stand up when you're scared or cold or whatever. And then the dermal papilla, the hair papilla is the little blood vessels that are feeding the hair and causing it to be made. So here we are. Let's see. You have your hair papilla right here. Right here's your hair matrix. Those cells are making the hair. You have melanocytes right here that are going to make the color. And then you have your medulla, cortex, and then way over here, cuticle on the outside. So that's the hair that's being made, right? And if you pull that out, you're going to see like cells kind of enveloped it, right? Okay, we have different types of hair. We have vellus hair, which is just like body hair that most of us have that isn't real coarse. And then terminal hair is your long coarse hair, like on your eyebrows and your scalp, and then pubic hair when you reach puberty. We lose about 90 scalp hairs daily, so if you're losing more than that, you can, I don't know if you want to count them, but you can tell if you're losing too many hairs. And you grow your hair about 2.25 millimeters per week. Our hormones can affect hair. And one example is hirsutism, where you have too much hair. You're making excessive hairiness. It might result in like a woman having a beard or something. Sometimes they can't figure out why it is, but there can be hormonal things that cause issues. Alopecia is where your hair thins, so you've probably heard of this. Happens to both sexes. It's different from balding. Balding is a different mechanism, and both are probably genetically determined, but balding is more common in males, right? Male pattern baldness. And then there's telogen effluvium, which is hair thinning because too many of your follicles are in the resting phase. So your hairs go through like a life cycle where they're growing and resting, and then they fall out, and it's just a normal progression. And I think they live like, each hair lives like 5 to 7 years or something like that. But sometimes your hair is in the resting phase too much and it's not growing. So this can be from hormonal changes, surgery, trauma, crash dieting. These are other things that can cause your hair to thin. Okay, nails now. Nails are also made of keratin. They are like appendages coming off of your epidermis, right? There's different parts of it. You have the free edge, the nail plate, and the root. And then the nail bed is like underneath where your nail is being made. And then nail matrix are the cells where it's making nail. So if we didn't have nails, the ends of our fingers would be bleeding all the time. Like, it is really important. I mean, you know that if you've ever lost a fingernail or a toenail. So the nail folds are the skin that overlaps the border there. Eponychium is the cuticle that is like right here as your nails coming out. Hyponychium is the the part that you get dirt in that you have to clean out. And then the lunula or lunule is that little white moon thing that is on your nail. So here's a picture. So there's your cuticle, there's your little lunula, the nail plate, the free edge, right? And so the nail is made back here at the nail matrix. That's where you're making nail. And then it eventually makes its way out, right? And this is the nail bed, and it has to stay connected to that, right? Okay. So some different things that your nails can do that are abnormal. You can have yellow tinge nails. It could be a thyroid gland or respiratory issue. If you have thickened yellow nails, it could be from fungal infection. You usually see this more on toenails. I can't remember how to say this. Koilenkia, I think, is when they're concave. So they form concave, like spoon-shaped, and that could be from iron deficiency. And then Bowes lines are like little lines that you can get across the nail. And that can be diabetes, heart attack, cancer, chemo, like some kind of issue. So that is, I forget how to say it, koilonychia, I think. You can look it up. Koilonychia. So if your nails look like that, you would know that that was a problem, right? Okay, now for sweat glands. So sweat glands are called sudoriferous glands. There are two types, and we all have different amounts, but there's two types, eccrine and apocrine. They work in different ways. Contract upon nervous system stimulation to force sweat into ducts. Oh, so you have these cells that cause the sweat to happen and form into ducts. Okay, so eccrine glands are on your palms, your forehead, the soles of your feet. They help you keep cool. And the sweat is mostly water. So these are the really watery glands. You also have salt, vitamin C, antibodies, dermacidin, that's spelled wrong. That's kills microbes on your skin, and then the metabolic waste. So that's like your typical sweat glands that are on your palms and feet. Let's see if they show them here. Right here is an eccrine gland, and and it just results in a sweat pore. Apocrine glands are different. They're in your axillary, that's your armpit, in your anogenital areas, so down in your nether regions. This sweat is more fatty, like more oily, and more smelly than your palms and your feet. I mean, your feet smell, but aren't really known as being quite as smelly, but your armpits for sure, and your genital regions. And so the reason it's sweaty or smelly is because of bacteria. And since these are fattier and they have proteins, there's more stuff for the bacteria to eat. So that's why that type of sweat is going to result in stinkier smell, because there's more bacteria. These are larger. The sweat usually comes out in hair follicles, and they become more active at puberty. Okay, so you have two kinds, ceruminous glands and mammary glands. These are two other types, like special types of apocrine glands. Ceruminous glands are what make your earwax, and then mammary glands make milk. And then so those two were sweat glands. Then you also have oil glands. that are just oily. So these are a lot of places except not on your palms or soles of your feet. They're usually with hair follicles. They wake up at puberty and they make sebum, which is like an oily substance. It conditions our skin, but it also can cause like acne, and it has bacteria killing properties. So let's see, sebaceous gland right here associated with a hair follicle, right? Okay, so it's comparing eccrine, apocrine, and sebaceous. So you can see eccrine is just on its own, apocrine is usually associated with a hair, and then sebaceous is with a hair. And it really does condition our hair and keep it nice and like sometimes too oily, but it keeps it from being brittle. Okay, so acne is usually from sebaceous glands, and it can form lots of things like pustules or cysts. There's a bacteria that's really common, Propionibacterium, that's usually found in acne. Whiteheads can form from sebaceous glands, and then it can become a blackhead. And then babies can have overactive sebaceous glands, but hopefully clear up. So there's a little baby called Saborea with overactive sebaceous glands. Okay, functions of skin. So skin's main functions, definitely write these down. Protection, body temp, cutaneous sensations, metabolic functions, blood reservoir, and excretion of wastes. So it's a really, really important protection for our body. Probably the most important. It's the first line of defense. Protects us against microorganisms, abrasions, temperature, harmful chemicals. 3 ways: a chemical barrier, so some of those oils protect, physical barrier, and then biological barrier. Okay, so chemical barrier, those chemicals that we mentioned already have stuff in them that kills bacteria. Your skin is also a low pH comparatively, and then the melanin protects you against UV light. Physical barrier, because it has all these little cells, and I think of them like shingles on a roof. They're like overlapping. Some chemicals can penetrate, but it's a pretty good protection for us. And then biological barrier, so we have special cells like macrophages and phagocytic cells that eat pathogens or antigens for lunch. Like that's their job, is to eat them, and that keeps us safe too. So all 3 of those are a first line of defense for us. If we have something that gets in, like heavy metals, can cause lots of problems. So we have to be really careful. We can't assume that our skin is like the perfect barrier, right? We have to wear PPE to protect us from that. Okay, so our body also keeps us the right temperature, maintains homeostasis. So sweat glands produce about 500 mils a day of unnoticeable sweat, and it just mostly evaporates. It's insensible perspiration. And then if you get hot, then you like actually notice you're sweating. That's called sensible perspiration. And then when you're in a cold environment, your blood vessels constrict, so they don't lose as much heat. And then other things happen too, and your body temperature tries to reduce heat loss. Okay, and then cutaneous sensory receptors. So this is telling you like what is going on around you, what's going on in your environment. And these are outside of your body. They help you notice if something's going on outside or something's going to hurt you. Okay, so you can see some different types of nerve structures. These free nerve endings at the top here are for light touch, and then these are for deeper touch. And then you can see some of the other structures we've looked at. So metabolic function. So skin is really important for making vitamin D. It doesn't just happen in the skin. There's other organs involved in making vitamin D, but it has to start in the skin through UV light. There's also some chemicals that will neutralize carcinogens. We also have like melanin protecting us from UV light. So there's a lot of different ways that our body can protect us from those things. So our skin can also hang on to blood and store blood. So about 5% of the body's blood can be there, and it can kind of help move blood to different regions that need them too. The excretion, we get rid of a lot of waste through our sweat, like nitrogenous waste, which is ammonia, urea, uric acid. We also pee that out, but some of it is through our sweat, and then salt and water. Okay, so now skin cancer. There's 1,000 different types of skin cancer, or different issues, not just skin cancer, different issues you can have with your skin, and some of them are cancer. So let's look at a couple. So there's 3 main types of skin cancer: basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma. You've probably heard of melanoma, but these are the other ones too. Most of the time they're not cancerous, but if they are, like, you need to get that taken care of and keep an eye on that. The risk factors are overexposure to UV radiation. I think they say if you've had like 3 burning, like blistering sunburns in your life, you're at like way higher risk for skin cancer. And then irritation to the skin. So basal cell carcinoma is very, very common. If you hear people getting like a little bit of skin removed, that's probably basal cell. It's like pinkish kind of and flaky. So really keep an eye on that and like check out the symptoms of it. But it's like if you're going to get skin cancer, it's the best one to get. So that's what it looks like. This is someone's nose. I have trouble seeing what we were looking at. It could look flaky, pink. It doesn't look dark usually. Melanoma is dark. And maybe have trouble healing, kind of like flaking, things like that. Squamous cell carcinoma is the second most common. This one can look scaly too and like bleed a lot. It's usually in like your scalp, ears, like places that see a lot of sun. And the cancer originates in your stratum spinosum. So that's what it looks like. And it like just won't heal. And there's other signs that you look for with skin cancer, like if the boundary of this growth is even, or if it's kind of wiggly. Wiggly is bad. And if it has like regular borders or irregular borders, if it's symmetrical or asymmetrical, those are some things you look at too. And then melanoma is the worst one. So this can spread to other parts of your body and is very dangerous. And we use this ABCD. There's also an E rule. So A is for asymmetry. If it's asymmetrical, that's bad. B is for border. You want an even border. C is for color. If it contains several colors, that's a bad sign. D is for diameter, so it needs to be not bigger than a pencil eraser. And then E is for evolving. So if you have a growth or someone you know does, take pictures of it and keep an eye on it and see if it's changing. So that, like if you had that, you would know. Like that's bad news. So that's melanoma. Melanoma is usually dark. Okay, burns are really dangerous. There's a scale to show like how much of your body is burned, and your body's broken into 11 sections, and it can be really, really dangerous. So you really have to be careful with burns. So first degree is when it's only epidermis, and you're not going to have like blistering or anything. Probably have pain, but this is like one of those burns that it goes away after like a day or two. Second degree is when your upper dermis is involved and you get blisters. Sometimes not right away. Sometimes it takes a little while to blister. Third degree burn is like the entire epidermis and dermis. Your skin can turn white or black. There may not be edema. This is usually where you're in the hospital getting surgery. So there's a third degree burn. If it involves muscle, obviously it's third degree. So you can see first degree, second degree, and third degree. Okay, if you have less or greater than 25% of your body is second degree burns, that's critical. You can imagine how terrible that would be. Greater than 10% third degree burns is critical, or if your face, hands, and feet have third degree burns, that's bad. They might have to do debridement, which is where they remove the dead skin or the burned skin. They might have to do antibiotics, covering it to protect you, because your skin's really critical to protect your body. And then you might have to have skin grafts. So these are the regions where they divide up your skin and like look at how much of what percentage it is. Okay, so this is fetal development of your skin. Around the 4th month, that's when the skin is growing. And you have a lanugo coat. Those are little hairs that form and protect the baby. And then you also make sebaceous glands. Um, and then they're born with them. Then from infancy, after the baby's born, to adulthood, the skin thickens, you get more fat. During puberty, sweat and sebaceous glands become active. That's why acne happens in puberty. And then after age 30, your skin starts to deteriorate. It's hitting everything like in the world. I mean, everything is attacking it. And so you can see why it would be really vulnerable to that. So when your skin ages, it's going to thin out. You're going to have less collagen, um, less sebaceous glands to keep it oily. Your hair is going to thin. You're exposed to a lot of things like light and chemicals and cold and hot and all of that. So keep your skin healthy. And that is it.